Hello, everyone. Did you have lunch yet? I didn't yet, so is it any good, or should I not bother? It's good? Okay, good. My name is Christoph Hammer. I'm the Senior Vice President for Cloud Services at Thimprint. And a couple of weeks ago, I was asked to talk 20 minutes about printing in Windows Virtual Desktop. And I was like, sure, no problem. And then I hung up and was like, how am I going to do that? The whole idea of our service is that people don't have to think about the architecture. We put it in the cloud, you don't have to worry about it. How do we talk architecture? So I think I found a way to do that. And let's pretend we are in charge of supporting the devices of our customers. And we want to support 75% of what's out there. What would we actually have to support? And we look at the categories: smartphones, tablets, personal computers, and then printers, of course. And if you want to support 75% of smartphone vendors in the market today, you just need to support two vendors. And that's Samsung and that's Apple. If you cover those two, you have 85% market support, you're good. If you want to support printer vendors, it's not much different. There are only three vendors that are dominating the market. So 75%, you're fine with covering HP, covering Canon, covering Epson. That's it. Personal computers, a little bit more, but not too many either. There's Lenovo, there's HP, there's Acer, Apple, and I got a cheat here. Let me see. Dell. Dell. I shouldn't have missed that one. So these are the five vendors. If you support all of them, you have more than 75% of market coverage. Now, unless you're responsible for actually supporting vendor relationships, that doesn't do you much good. So let's drill down a little bit here. How many devices would you have to support to, again, cover 75% of the market? As of right now, there are 31 smartphones/tablets available from these two vendors, Apple and Samsung. For the personal computers, due to their modular nature, you can pick any number, basically. I just said, okay, 10, each of them has 10 devices. If you say each has 20, double this number, doesn't make a difference. What you see here, those three printer vendors are currently selling 387 different printer models in the US. Three vendors, over 100 devices each. And I think you get the idea why printing is such a pain in the butt. And it gets better for us, worse for you. If we now say, okay, let's support 100% of the software that runs these devices. Because after all, if you support the software supports the device, you're good. We have, at the most, I think, 28 software versions that we need to support for smartphones or tablets. Right? This is based on the Android versions and iOS version of the last 20 years. You probably want to take a few old ones out of there, maybe add another BlackBerry operating system to that, or maybe a Palm that's still laying around, but it's roughly 28, 30. Personal computers, the same idea. If you add the Mac operating systems and the Windows operating systems of the last 20 years, you come up with 37. You might want to take Windows 95 out of this and add a few Linux versions. Still, you're around 35 to maybe 40 operating systems that need to support. And here comes the big point. If you were to get a printer right now and see what printer drivers you can use, and you go to the Windows Update service to do that, you have 14,000 options that you can choose from to make this one printer work. And probably 13,995 and a half will not work. And that's what is a huge, huge problem when it comes to printing. And that's why we, as Thimprint, exist to make that problem easier. Now you might say, well, there's 14,000 drivers, that's ridiculous, last 20 years, why do I care about those? So let's be a little bit more realistic. Last year, 650 million printers were in use worldwide. Personal use, corporate use, government use, all of them, roughly 650 million. There were over 50 print vendors that are selling printers at the moment worldwide. Some of them are very specialized, like label printers, barcode printers, things like that. But many of them also general use office printing. And these vendors sold 90 million printers just in the last year. There's a lot of new printers that end up on somebody's IT desk and say, make this work. Each of them, I reckon, has between 3 to 5 printer drivers that you at least need to consider. You might get lucky and the first one works. You might have to go through all 5 of them or somewhere in between. These problems won't go away. And there are other problems that don't go away with printing. For example, the endpoint configuration. It's usually the next big pain in the butt. Now I figured out the driver, now I have to get this driver onto this device. And there's a Windows 10, and there's a Windows 7, there's a 2008 R2, and we have a 2016. We have to figure out how to configure these, get the drivers on it. We also have to configure how these printers actually then get, or how these printer queues actually get to the printers. We have to consider the network, if there even is a connection between them. Is it secure, is it unsecure? And then who actually has access to these printers, and who's going to pay for all of that, right? So all this stuff does not go away, but with Windows Virtual Desktop, we're adding more to it, so that life doesn't become too easy. I always call it job security for the IT team, right? There's always more to do. Windows Virtual Desktop adds another layer on it. They might not call it that way, and I might not be politically correct here, but you're already supporting the physical device, and now you also have the virtual device, which replicates some of the functions that you already manage locally. So with that additional layer, you again have to figure out printer assignment, drivers. What is new now is you have to also consider the capabilities of the client device that is used to access this virtual desktop. If I use my iPad and I want to print back to an AirPrint printer, that's not going to work, right? It's a totally different capability than using a Windows 10 device where I have a USB port, I got a print system, everything is fine. I also have to consider the protocol that's being used. I can use RDP printer redirection if my local device actually knows what RDP printer redirection is, if there's software that supports that. The other area is the communication happens now on a global scale. So quite a few issues are happening with printing on a global scale that wouldn't happen on a local network. Print jobs can get very large. I can print this slide deck, about 20 slides or so. I can print that easily with a driver and create a gigabyte large spool file, which you then will send from your Azure cloud down across the Atlantic or Pacific or wherever your user actually is to their physical device and then to the printer. Now every gigabyte or terabyte that leaves your Azure cloud costs you money. It depends on where your contract levels are, but data leaving costs money, something to consider. Now the other thing is bandwidth. If you have low bandwidth, huge print jobs, printing will take very long. If you add bad latency to that as well, printers might not even make it, or 5 pages made it, the other 6 didn't. Bidirectional communication in combination with latency is deadly when it comes to printing, because then really the printer wants to update the sender that something is going on, the sender never gets that message, keeps sending data, and it just breaks. Print protocols, there are various out there on the local network. It doesn't really matter as much. You can print with TCP/IP, you can do IPP, things like that. When it comes to a global scale, the protocol matters, and that's because of latency, bandwidth, and the actual efficiency of that protocol. And probably the biggest problem is how do you even get to that printer, right? I am somewhere in the Azure cloud on a desktop. My printer is somewhere local behind an IP address that has a firewall, has another firewall, has a VLAN. How do I get to that printer and actually make that work? Ideally, to solve this, we need to find an architecture that solves both problems, right? The problems that we already have with printing, plus the new ones that will be added with the Windows Virtual Desktop. And that means, for me, design your printing for the location, not for the device. And the reason behind this is a very simple math. If I got 50 locations and I got 5,000 users, and these 5,000 users have 6,000 devices, I have to worry about 6,000 potential devices they might have or might not have, and these devices usually change once a year, every other year. I have to redesign printing constantly to make sure that everything keeps working. When you design for locations, you got 50 locations, it becomes an infrastructure thing. You design it once, you replicate it 50 times, and you're done. It simplifies your print architecture tremendously. Third recommendation is, don't design for specific protocols or VPNs. You want to stay flexible. So if you do printer redirection, then obviously it will only work with devices that have locally configured printers, only devices that have local print systems, only devices that actually support printer redirection. If you design for VPNs, you're kind of stuck with environments that have static VPN situations or environments. Last year, there were 8 million people in the United States working from home. The trend of co-working, of shared offices, of small teams that assemble on a very agile basis and then disassemble afterwards, that kind of workspace flexibility you couldn't really support if your print solution is dependent on traditional VPNs. That's why I recommend don't use VPNs either. And obviously, design around the hardware you already have. If you design for the hardware that you would like to have, you very likely need another budget that is probably a lot bigger than your Windows Virtual Desktop budget. Users should not need to change anything. Users don't care about the problems we're having. Users just want to hit the print button, it comes out, done. Now, this is an architecture slide from Microsoft. And it basically describes here on the left side somewhere, on this left side here, it describes the clients that it describes the devices that the customers are managing. In this center, it describes the services that Microsoft manages and to provide the virtual desktops here on the right side. So the virtual desktops are managed by the customers, obviously, where you have your desktop, you got your apps, your profile management. All of that is tied together nicely with Azure Active Directory domain services. What we're doing as easy is we're adding printing as a service in the Azure cloud, in parallel to the services that you have with Windows Virtual Desktop that provide this functionality. We're taking care of the printing services. And that means in this case that we have a very strong management pane, a very strong management engine that you can access simply with a web browser. You log in, you see your printers, you assign your printers to your users, and therefore the system knows who should get to which printer. We also have a connection broker here. That means when print data is going into our cloud service or out of the cloud service, the connection broker makes sure that this print data arrives at the right printer that this user was allowed to actually print to. And what we're really proud of is this connection broker also checks if that printer, if the print data is already in the format for that printer. That means in this case, those 14,000 drivers that I mentioned earlier, they're running on our cloud, not on your data center, not on your print servers. We are hosting these drivers. That also means when there are new drivers coming out, we verify them, we check them, we make sure they play nice with each other, and then we make them available to our customers here as part of this rendering service. Now, to use this cloud service, we just need an entry point, exit point, basically 2 agents. On one side, we call that the eZeep connector. This piece connects your printers with your cloud account in the eZeep cloud. And it's either a piece of hardware, a small appliance, or a piece of software that you can install on your existing infrastructure hardware. And on the other side, we're installing an agent we call the eZeep Print app. And this eZeep Print app basically creates the printer queues for the users the same way that they would normally see a printer queue. So they log in, they authenticate to their desktop, they log in. This eZeep Print app says to the eZeep cloud, hey, I got this user, what printers should I create? And then the cloud says, yep, according to my management system and my databases here, create these 5 printers for that user. It creates that in the background, and all the user has to do is hit print. Print data is compressed, is encrypted, sent through the broker, potentially rendered, and then sent all the way to the connector and then to the printer. It's a very nice and easy printing solution. And that's where the name eZeep comes from easy printing. Because all the complicated things, all the months of research and developing is happening down here. You don't have to worry about that. Now, we also offer this connector as a piece of software that you can install on individual PCs. So if you got home office users, or if you got like delivery drivers where location and device is one-on-one relationship, you can also just use that software. Really important to us is that when you use a cloud service, you don't build another island. So it's really important to us that we have standard APIs, we have the ability for developers to attach to them and basically enhance the ecosystem, enhance the functionality by, for example, adding a print option into their own web portal, adding a print option into their back office system, so that we take care of the delivery, we take care of the internet, of the security, and they just send us the payload basically to print. We also offer an API for enhancing hardware. So if you're already manufacturing a printer, if you're already manufacturing a conference phone, if you're already building a multimedia streaming device, you can make all these devices endpoints in that EasyP cloud and provide printing to your infrastructure or to your customers. And then last but not least, management. You can use an API to see how much printing is going on. You will be able to use an API to see which printers are on or not on. You will be able to use the API to onboard, offboard your people and set permissions. Now, besides the developments that our partners are doing, and right now we have like 30-something partners. If you're interested, go to cloud-printing-alliance.com. We're also obviously enhancing this platform. So we got a nice basic that is a modular structure where we can add features to it. For example, Office 365 printing. If I don't even have a Windows desktop anymore, I just have a web browser, I have my Office apps in there, I need a print button. We can deliver that. Also printing from mobile devices, from Android devices, iOS, seeing the print activity so that you actually know what's going on with your printing and you can make smarter decisions by having that kind of information. Or what we hear here a lot at this show, simple follow me printing, simple secure printing, where you provide one printer queue to your users, they all hit print, and then you just walk up to the printer and they use their badge to release, or they use their smartphone to scan a code, or they use an email address where they basically just type in a printer number. We will tie all of that together with print policies, where you can also then set things like, this group always prints black and white. This group always has to print in duplex to keep costs down. So, best practices, just to wrap this up. Design for locations, not for users. Simple math, it keeps things simple if you don't have to consider every device. It keeps it simple if you don't have to consider which device in the near future will impact my printing. So consider printing an infrastructure component more than an individual device component. Second part, limit printer drivers. I think that is obvious. You still need the driver somewhere, but you don't need it everywhere. So any kind of deployment or architecture that says, okay, let's just deploy all the drivers we got to everybody, will likely not be a good idea. Really identify where is the printing happening and where do I actually need that printer driver to be installed. VPNs, I talked about this, don't make it a requirement. Keep your business agile. Make sure that you can follow the trends, not just with new devices, but also with new work styles, and many of them don't have traditional offices and traditional infrastructure. Block processing is really important, also really hard to explain. So let me use an example. Right now you got this HTML5-based Windows Virtual Desktop printing function, where the user can hit a print button. The Windows Virtual Desktop creates a PDF, it is then downloaded, the pop-up comes up, the user can select the printer, then it starts spooling on the local machine, and then it prints. Those are 5 or 6 steps. Each of this step can only start after the previous one is completely done. So it basically slows down the printing process when you go in blocks. So any kind of print solution, any kind of print design, pick one that can start with the second step before the first step is completely done. Right? Have one that can start up the printer so that it warms up before the Windows Virtual Desktop is even done spooling the print job. Only then do you get really the fastest delivery through all these steps all the way to the device. And then last point, and I think that's obvious to anybody who has to administrate these cloud environments, don't pick islands, don't design islands. Design solutions that use standard interfaces to communicate with other solutions. And if you're going for third-party solutions, make sure they don't just talk to other solutions of the same vendor, but to talk to other solutions of every vendor. This is basically my main points here. I really appreciate you're sitting through this and you're coming here. If you're interested in more information, simply come to our booth here at number 149. And if you want to have more information about this or try it out yourself, you can also go to easyp.com/WVD and look around our website. If you've got any questions, I will be here for a few more minutes. Just come up. Thank you very much.